Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Skalberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy to be here today with Nicole Crowder from Conroe ISD. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time to be here today. I always like to go over a few housekeeping items as we get started so you can plan your time. So today's webinar is being recorded, so everyone who is registered for today's webinar is going to get a copy of today's slides and also a copy of a template for a letter of intent, which is what we will be talking about today. We are in webinar mode, and what that means for you is that we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're out there. The chat box is open, so if you have questions throughout the presentation, we'll be monitoring the chat box and we'll be answering as many questions as time allows. This is typically a little bit shorter presentation, so we probably won't take the whole hour. We're blocked out for an hour today. Just in case that you are planning or you're on your lunch hour or what have you. So having said that, I am going to get started. For those of you that have attended our webinars and in the past, thank you and welcome back. For anyone who is here for the first time, we are glad that you're here. Consolidated Planning Group has a YouTube channel. There's probably almost 500 webinars on planning for special needs out there. You can subscribe to it for free. There's no cost involved. If you can think of a topic surrounding your loved one with a disability, we've probably talked about it. We take a deep dive with guardianship, special needs trust, SSI, Medicaid waivers. I mean, the topics are endless, obviously, if there's 500 webinars out there, but we've tried to organize them in such a manner that you can search for the topic that you're that kind of the things that you're working on or going through right now and find the information that you need to out there. That YouTube channel was born out of my own frustration. I am a parent to 2 adult children with disabilities, and I eat, sleep, and breathe planning for special needs. That's what I do. And I truly found it difficult when transitioning to adulthood with these kids. I found it unnecessarily difficult. Like, why is everything that we do so hard? And so if you've been thinking that, I just want you to know that you are not alone. You're not crazy. It is unnecessarily difficult. So that's why we do what we do. But today, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Consolidated Planning Group, who we are and what we do. And we're going to take a deeper dive into a letter of intent and why you might want to have one of these for your loved one with a disability. So Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We have over 30 years of experience. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. Our whole firm is nuanced in planning for a loved one with a disability. When it comes to planning for a loved one with a disability, our situation is specialized, so we do recommend that you work with a specialist. And the main reason behind that is because we want you to preserve eligibility for state and federally funded programs. Excuse me. It's important that we have money in the right buckets and that we plan appropriately for our loved one with a disability so we maintain their eligibility for the future of public benefits. So this is really, really important. We help people put protection plans in place. We do lifetime care planning, transition planning. We help open and establish ABLE accounts. And we do a lot of advocacy by way of webinars and education. We want you to feel empowered, not defeated when it comes to planning for your loved one, because it can feel pretty alone. It can feel pretty isolating when you're trying to make plans for your loved ones, because it's just so confusing and you're always feeling like you're going to say the wrong thing, you're going to mess something up, you're not going to do something right. And so that's why we do all the advocacy that we do. So sometimes people want to understand the difference, of what we do and what a regular advisor does. And while we do have some of the same similar licenses, we have additional certifications that they don't have. And furthermore, because we're specifically nuanced in special needs, we ensure that you have money in the right buckets. We really go deep and wide when it comes to planning for a loved one with disability, maintaining that eligibility for Medicaid, Medicaid waivers, Medicaid programs, and SSI are, to name a few, that could accidentally get messed up along the way. So we do a lot of that. So when it comes to planning for special needs, some of the questions that we hear all the time is who's going to care for your child when you're gone? And we help people develop a future care plan that will answer some of these questions. When we're thinking about transition, when you have a child in high school, 14 and up, you should start already be thinking about transition, because I know when they're a freshman, you think you have all this time and it goes by really, really quick. So you want to be thinking about, post-high school educational options and vocational options. And I always like to report, and we have entire webinars on college planning for kids with disabilities. There are many, many programs in Texas and across the United States that higher education that are specifically developed for folks that have a disability, and including an intellectual disability. So don't think that that higher education is completely out of the picture or off the table, because there's lots of opportunities out there to educate yourself on. We also suggest that you start touring transition programs, partial care, full care, residential living communities. Waiting lists can be very, very long. A lot of the schools have 18 plus programs, RISE programs, SHINE programs. They have different programs for individuals that have an intellectual disability, and you're going to want to be working with your school and your counselors, your ARD meetings, with your 504s and your IEPs. If it is your intention for your child with a disability to stay in the public school post age 18, then communicating early with the educational institution is important. There are outside transition programs that are paid for. They're typically not free. Some of them can be offset if you're getting a Medicaid waiver, but you're going to want to look at this early. And then the other thing that we always like to mention is the importance of making careful considerations before naming siblings as a future caregiver. And when I say to that, I'm not insulting anybody. People say family's family and we stick together. I've heard it all. But what I think of is that your other children have hopes and dreams, just like you had hopes and dreams when you were 18, 20, 25, 30. Maybe you're going to go to college. Maybe you're going to get married. Maybe you want to have a home. Maybe you want to have a family. There's all kinds of things that are going on in their hopes and dreams. And a lot of times what we see is the sibling being a future caregiver is of last resort or failing to plan. There are better options. We like to see siblings in a loving, non-obligatory relationship with their sibling, as opposed to being, feeling like they're saddled up with something that they're not equipped to handle. So I just want to mention that. So today, what we're talking about is a letter of intent and why you might need one. So a letter of intent is sometimes a buzzword. You've probably heard this. You've probably heard this before. We're going to talk a little bit more about what a letter of intent is and what it's not, and why this might go alongside some of the documents that you may already have in place. So what a letter of intent is, it's really just an important part of planning for the future of your loved one with special needs. It is not a legal document, but it can actually ensure that your trustee or your guardians know your child's functional abilities, routines, interests, particular likes and dislikes. And I often say here is, as a parent, and I don't care if you're mom or dad, you have probably forgot more about your loved one's needs than anybody will ever know. And we act like robots sometimes as parents. You just go through the motions. You just do what you do. This is how we roll. This is our normal. It's not somebody else's normal. So if you are incapacitated or you're no longer here on earth, what this letter of intent is trying to do is to state what your intentions are for your loved one with a disability, and give the individual that would be stepping into your shoes all of the information that they need to be successful with your loved one and to make the transition as smooth as possible. It's not going to be smooth. If a parent has died or incapacitated, it is traumatic for the individual with the disability. Doesn't matter if they're an adult or if they're a child, it's a traumatic experience. So this is trying to lessen some of that, so that way we can keep some of those routines and some of those other things that we already have in place continuing on. Because when we have a trauma of such as a loss of a parent or incapacitation of a parent, keeping those other routines going is going to lessen the blow a little bit. Okay. So one question that we get on a regular basis is, do I really need a letter of intent if I already have a last will and testament, or a revocable trust, or a special needs trust and guardianship in place? Do I really need that? And a letter of intent is going to go alongside of these documents that you already have in place, such as the will, special needs trust, and guardianship. Those are legal documents and they're important, but they don't get in the weeds with your child's functionality and other things like that. We want to ensure your child's financial future is only, that's taken care of and that we've got money in the right buckets, but their care needs, we want to make sure that that their care needs are being met, and that the person that has stepped into your shoes has all of the tools and resources that they need to be successful. And what I'm getting at here is, it's kind of like the idea of somebody dies and you hear of somebody ripping the house apart, under the mattress, in the drawers, the floorboard of the car, the trunk of the car, looking for information to help them navigate their new role. And so that's what we're trying to avoid here. Okay. So why you need a letter of intent: it's going to communicate your knowledge, including specific hopes and desires for your child's future and well-being. It's going to identify diagnosis, health history. It identifies medications, treating physicians, likes, dislikes, allergies. I think of what makes your child thrive, what makes your child shut down. Those are all things that are going to be important information, and it's not something that you necessarily wrote down. And sometimes even in your household, if you're the caregiver and the other parent works every day, some stuff that you do as the care provider, some stuff the spouses sometimes don't even know. So it's really important to get this down. Your letter of intent is going to be very unique to your child, your family's circumstance. You're going to start with the facts and then you're going to move to personal details. It's a living document that will evolve as your child grows and develops, and it should be updated regularly. I tell people, if the diagnosis is pretty static, it pretty much stays the same, it's not changing or getting worse or things like that, then maybe updating this once a year. If your situation with your loved one with a disability is changing all of the time, new diagnoses, or it's a degenerative condition or things like that, then you're going to want to update that more frequently. So some of the things that you'll find in the letter of intent, and as I mentioned, we have a template for this, and we're going to be sharing that to everyone who registered today for today's webinar. You're going to get our form fillable letter of intent. It's about 20 pages long. It is form fillable, and so you don't have to create your own. Some people create their own. They create it in a notebook or on paper. I like the form fillable one because it's easily edited, and you can go back to it again and again without having to completely redo it. So you're going to have family information in here, medical history and care, any information about government benefits such as SSI, SSDI, childhood disability benefits, could be VA benefits or pensions from VAs or other military organizations, living arrangements and accommodations, if they're living with you or living outside of the home, if they're living outside of the home in a residential living community, where is it, what is it, how much does it cost, how is it being paid, that kind of information. Educational information: what schools did they attend, where have they been, have they worked, names, address, and phone numbers of employers if they've worked and if they're currently working, personality and habits, recreation and fitness, What are your spiritual values? What are your beliefs? Some of the things that could be in here, like, I think of, we live in Texas, we live in a very cultural melting pot. And what I mean by that is, like, at death, for instance, different cultures have different rituals and different things that they do and they don't do at death. And so if those things are important to you, things like different religions and different cultures may have a prevention of blood products or other things like that. There's all kinds of stuff out there, and none of it's wrong. It's whatever is important to your family. But if you want somebody else to know that, it's got to be in this document. Legal guardians, successor legal guardians. If there is a special needs trust, where is it? Where will they find a copy of it? Who is the successor trustee? What's the name, address, and phone number of your family attorney, or of the attorney that did the trust and your legal documents? Power of attorney, if there's any power of attorney in force for finances. Medical power of attorney, HIPAA release, those are all some of those things. And location of important documents, policy, bank accounts, etc. Having a running list of other accounts that you guys have, if it's your mortgage or whatever, like if something happened and you're both gone, like the services that might need to be shut off or contact or things like that, that can all go in there as well. And then all of your contact information for any trusted advisors that you have that are working with you. And we do suggest that consider inviting your child to help you prepare this information. So we understand that some people have a child with a disability that does not have capacity to understand any of that. And so we're not suggesting that. And we do understand that there are kids with disabilities that have communication issues. So we understand that as well. But if you have a child that has thoughts and opinions, and it's kind of the thought of nothing about them without them, to the extent that you can include them, we do suggest that you include them in this process of creating the letter of intent. So I also talk about, when it comes to the letter of intent, giving yourself some grace and time in completing it. You don't have to complete this in one full swoop and one sitting. It's a 20-page form fillable document. So it's a lot, and it's a lot of information, and a lot of the information that you put in there is a little bit thought-provoking. Sometimes it could be emotionally provoking from a perspective of hopes and dreams and where you are versus where you wished you would be. Sometimes that's the case for some people. So you can do it at a little bit at a time. You don't have to do it all at once. So this is an example in our letter of intent, which I'm going to show you in a moment. My slides just went crazy. I'm going to show you our letter of intent in a moment. There's a lot of free space in there, and this is where I call it the family love letter. This is the free space for you to write or speak your truth or speak your heart. What I really need you to know is what is super, super important to me. Those are types of things that are very personal for the person that is creating the letter of intent for the individual. So here's an example. Hannah likes to dress herself, but needs a little help picking out the right outfit. She sometimes needs help with buttons and zippers and deciding what is weather appropriate. She really enjoys wearing clothes that are soft, nothing that will be scratchy on her skin. She also prefers colorful clothing and a pant instead of skirts. She likes to walk to school with her friends, Lena and Scotty, with me following closely on course. So and so it just might give bedtime routines, bath time routines, homework routines, school routines. These are all things that you might include in your free space. And you don't have to fill up all this free space. We put a lot of free space in there, so it could be as long or as short as you want, and that you don't run out of space with that. So this is the letter of intent workbook. And if you just bear with me 1 second, I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to bring up the actual, I think I am. Maybe I'm not. I actually don't see it, so I'm going to just go back to the slides. Let me know if you can see my slides okay. Just a thumbs up is fine. Okay, good. So the letter of intent, this is going to be the front of the workbook. And again, it's a 20 page form fillable. So it's got the prompts that you need to fill it out, without a lot of guidance. It's going to be pretty specific and on the questions that it's asking, and anything that you find that's not in there, you can include that in your free space. But as a gift to everyone attending today, we're going to send a copy of today's slides as well as a copy of the letter of intent workbook, so that way you can fill that out as you see fit. Okay, so one of the things that we talk about on a pretty regular basis is self-care when it comes to caregivers. As a caregiver for an individual with a disability, if they're going to have care needs for the rest of their life, this is what we call the marathon, not the sprints. Your semblance of retirement looks different than a family that has kids that are neurotypical, that are going to go to college and sail off into the sunset and kind of be on their own. And so I think it's important to know that 53% of caregivers said that their own health had worsened due to caregiving, and that their declined health affected their ability to provide care. 55% of caregivers are unaware of how to establish a lifetime financial plan for their special needs dependent. So when it comes to the planning, I never have to tell parents you should think more about your child, because that's all we do is eat, sleep, and breathe and think about these kids and how we can help them be their best self that they can be with whatever things that they're dealing with that may hold them back. But we got to think about ourselves and self-care, and having some support in place, and having some vision of what your retirement will look like and how you have balance and respite during that time. We've talked to caregivers that are 80 years old still caring for their loved one with a disability, and they're saying, hey, I can't do this as good anymore, or I'm not feeling that well myself. So thinking about this, when you're of sound mind and body, we're all aging. And so, you want to make sure that you've got some plans in place for when that day comes that you can't provide the caregiving services that you once did. There is no right or wrong answer or a perfect example of post high school of what's going to happen with your child. I have some families that we work with that they definitively want their child to live in a residential living facility, and it's not because they're pushing them away, it's because they want them to grow. It's because they want them to have some autonomy away from the parents, and vice versa, for the parents to have some autonomy away from the individual. For them to be able to grow. Maybe they can work, maybe they can have a small job, maybe they work, I think of places like Brookwood or Marbridge, and they have the nursery and the things that they work on, and they make all kinds of floral stuff and things like that, and different shops that they work in and stuff like that, the greenhouse. So it's whether or not you're thinking about post high school. Is this when I want this to start? Is it when they turn 25? Is it when they're 30? Or is it over your dead body and they're going to stay with you until you are dead or can no longer handle it? So there's not a right or wrong answer. My opinion is transitioning a little bit along the way is important. And I'm going to give you an example of an individual, a family who had a loved one with a disability who's going to need care for the rest of their life. And the family keeps the child at home. They never live anywhere residentially. After high school, they stay at home. They're not in a transition program. They're not going to camp. They're not doing anything. It's been mom and dad and the kid all of these years. And then later on, the parents are 75 or 80 years old. They're sick. They're dying, and then all of a sudden the rug is pulled out from under the kid, but the kid isn't 16, the kid's 45 or 55 years old, and they've known one thing their whole life. Now the rug's pulled out from under them, they've lost their parent, and now they're thinking about, they're not thinking about, they're put into some residential living situation, and it feels bad. So my thought process is, even if you want your child to stay at home with you as long as possible throughout the years, get them in a transition program, get them in some type of program where they're contributing to society. They have friends, they have community. It can be several times a week. I see some that are 5 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, doing that throughout, so it's not so shocking. Another thing to consider is some of these sleepaway camps for individuals with a disability, to where away from you sometimes. These camps are really fun. They're staffed with people, so their medical needs can be met. So thinking about some of those things for the future, I think, is also important to integrate that in as we're planning for the long term. I know sometimes it's like, I call it tunnel vision, where we're just thinking right here, right now, because we're just thinking about, maybe we're thinking about the crisis that's going on right now. Maybe we're just thinking of how we can survive or get through high school. But there's so many other, factors that come into play, and thinking about right now and the future and long-term future, that the plans that you put in place now are going to make a difference in the future. And you don't have to be, a millionaire to start making these plans. It just needs to be thoughtful and intentional, and really thinking about what it is that you want, and what might work for me and my family may be a far cry from what would work for you or your family. But exploring what those options are, getting our kids on waiting lists, because waiting lists for residential living situations can be quite long. Those are all going to be things that are good steps. The other thing is for the higher education programs, researching these programs early. Where are they? How many openings do they have? When does the application process start? Those are all good things to be thinking about as well, because they don't have unlimited enrollment. They don't have unlimited spots. So really narrowing down what some of these programs are out there. We've had a lot of families have success with these programs, and quite honestly, we've had families have success with all of the programs for individuals with disabilities in Texas. So you name it, we've probably had a kid there, and have had some real successes along the way with that. So things that I want you to keep on your radar. If you've attended in the past, I put this on every single slide. And I think the important thing is, because it's a lot and we're always drinking from the fire hose of what we need to do next on planning for our kids. So I always like to keep some things on your radar. So we've kind of talked a little bit about developing a comprehensive special needs care plan. What's now, what's next, what does that look like? Getting future care cost estimates. We help people develop future care cost estimates for their child. This answers questions such as, how much do I need to fund a special needs trust? How much are the care expenses going to be? That kind of thing. Texas waivers and interest list. If you're attending here today and you're not from Texas, all states have what they call Medicaid waivers. Some of them have different names than the names that we have in Texas, but we have a Medicaid waiver webinar on our YouTube channel that you can check out. Unfortunately, in the state of Texas, we have about a 17-year waiting list for Medicaid waivers. So what a Medicaid waiver is designed to waive off some of the cost of care for caring for an individual with a disability, to keep them in home and community-based services. It might pay for housing, it might pay for various therapies, minor home modifications. It just depends on which waiver it is. But there is an interest list, there's a waiting list. And if your child is not on these waiting lists, you need to get them on the waiting list sooner versus later, because of the long waiting list that we have in Texas. It is true that some other states don't have a waiting list. So if you're listening in from another state, you want to check your state, you can check in with us. We've got a lot of information on the other states. We work with people all across the United States, not just in Texas. But some states don't even have a waiting list, but a lot of times people don't even know that the Medicaid waivers exist. So just educating yourself on that. SSI and SSDI, understanding the differences and knowing when to apply and what to apply for, it's very, very important. Not all, but most people don't qualify for SSI and Medicaid when their child is under age 18 because it's based off of the parent's income and assets prior to the child turning 18. And so basically they don't qualify not because they're not disabled, but because they don't meet the financial qualifications, because it's for the disabled and the financially indigent. Okay, so but once the child turns 18, it is based off of the parents. After the child turns 18, it's no longer based off of the parents' income and assets, it's based off of the child's income and assets. So for planning for your child, you want to make sure they don't have more than $2,000 in their name. If they do have more than $2,000, it needs to be in an ABLE account or a special needs trust. We have entire presentations for every bullet on the things to keep on your radar. We have entire presentations on our YouTube channel so you can dig deeper. ABLE accounts, we have lots of presentations out there on that, but this is an allowable asset that you can have more than $2,000 for the kid in an ABLE account. We help people set that up all the time. It's important to check your beneficiary designations. On a meeting of this size, it's probably fair to say that probably upwards of 85% of you here today have made a mistake in your beneficiary designations, and it's just because nobody knows better, honestly. We don't want to name our loved one with a disability directly as a beneficiary on anything that we have, because we don't want them to get a large sum of money in the future and to make them lose Medicaid or SSI. So the proper way to leave money to a loved one with a disability is through a special needs trust for the benefit of said child. So what a lot of people do is they name their spouse as their beneficiary, and then once the spouse is dead and gone, then they name their children equally as equal beneficiaries. So you don't want to name a minor child as a beneficiary, and you don't want to name a special needs child at any age as a beneficiary as opposed to their special needs trust. If you have done this, which I'm sure you have, like I said, 85% of you have, it's easy to fix. You don't have to hire anybody to fix it. All you got to do is call the company, call the carrier, and you might want to check your beneficiary designations through HR at work, and also any life insurance, investment accounts, bank accounts, etc. And you can request a change of beneficiary form, and you can change your beneficiary for free. So it's an easy fix. Don't panic. But I just wanted to mention that for people that may have not heard it before. And this is important to have intentional conversations on beneficiary designations for your parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, anybody that might leave money to your loved one with a disability. They need to know not to leave it to them directly and outright, but to leave it to a special needs trust for the benefit of said child. Okay. So we talk about, starting to tour residential living communities early. Getting your name on the waiting list. A lot of the residential living communities have waiting lists. Some of them can be 5 years or longer. One important thing I want to mention on our YouTube channel is we have done multiple residential living community options. And what these webinars are, I call it kind of like speed dating. We invite all these residential communities across the state to attend and to speak, and they each get 3 to 5 minutes to tell us who they are, where they're located, who they serve, how much they cost, whether or not they have a waiting list, and whether or not they take Medicaid waivers. And we do this on purpose to help you, because we're, again, always drinking from a fire hose, and doing all that research on your own could take hours and hours and hours. So in the course of an hour, you can learn about 12 to 15 different places. And from that webinar, maybe decide if you want to visit their website, or if you'd like to go take a tour, if it might be a good fit for your loved one. So you'll want to check those out. We have creating your own group home. We have a webinar on that, kind of creating your own residential living situation. And then also you'll want to check out the Opportunity Mortgage webinar that we have. This talks about a mortgage that is available. It's a traditional mortgage, just like you would get for a regular house. So should you build a house or a condo or a duplex or something like that for your loved one with a disability, you can get a regular mortgage, not a investment property mortgage, if it's specifically for an individual with a disability. So we have multiple webinars on that too. You'll want to check that out. Most people don't even know that that exists. And honestly, a lot of mortgage brokers don't even know that it exists. So it's kind of the difference of, kind of specialty and kind of being in the weeds with that kind of thing. So when you're coming around the bend and transitioning and we're getting close to 18, you're going to want to consider guardianship. Alternatives to guardianship: power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, supported decision-making agreements. The guardianship process can begin 6 months prior to turning 18 for the guardianship to take effect once they turn 18. There is a such thing as an educational power of attorney that can be helpful if your child's still going to be in high school once they turn 18, but maybe you're not going to go down the guardianship route. Guardianship is a big deal. In Texas, it's the least restrictive, most appropriate for the ward is what is the deal. In general, we have entire webinars on guardianship with attorneys, kind of talking about what the options are. You'll need to work with an attorney to get your guardianship. If you are low on funds or would be considered indigent, there are some programs out there. Disability Rights Texas is one. And if you go to Google and type in legal aid and put in your county, you can find out if there's any other legal aid programs in your area for low income. But for the most part, you're going to pay for guardianship, and I would say probably anywhere between $1,500 and $3,000 if you're planning financially is probably what you'll be looking at for a non-contested guardianship. So do check out those webinars. Guardianship can feel pretty, it's a lot. It's a lot of information. Your child has to be served. It's signed off on by a doctor. It is approved by a judge. And going through that process, I can feel pretty emotional, taking the rights away of your child. Some people don't want to take the rights away from their child. And somebody will say, well, guardianship's the only way, or the other way is the only way. You need a power of attorney. If a kid does not have capacity to understand what they're signing, then a power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, and supported decision-making agreement might not be sufficient. Okay. And that's where you're going to want to see about guardianship or partial guardianship and kind of learn more about that. And everybody's situation is completely different, but I do want you to know, some people say they don't want to do guardianship because they're afraid that they'll be responsible. So if we have a child that has violent tendencies or they do something crazy, the parents are afraid that they're going to be responsible, and that is not the case unless there was negligence involved. So again, on the webinars, the YouTube channel, I think Nicole has put that. Nicole, if you'll paste that again, are the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. All of these webinars are going to be out there, so you can kind of take a deeper dive into all of that. And Nicole, did we have any questions that I haven't answered? I want to make sure. I see one. My son grew up in Texas and is now 37. I honestly don't recall if I added him to the waiver wait list in Texas. How to check? He also just moved to Colorado. So if he moved to Colorado, he needs to be on the Colorado list. And actually, I think Colorado doesn't have a list anymore. Colorado's list used to be about 8 or 10 years, and they got everybody off their list. When they legalized marijuana, they used some of the revenues from the taxes from that, and they got people off of their interest list. So you're going to want to call, and sometimes a good place to start might be the ARC. Everybody has a local authority, but they call them different things. But Center for Individuals with Disabilities, and we have some Colorado resources, so you can reach out. But it's not going to matter if he's in California, North Carolina, or Texas. It's where he is now. And even if he was on the interest list in Texas, now that he's not a resident here, his number on the list simply doesn't matter. California doesn't have quite a long waiting list. Colorado doesn't either. North Carolina does have a list. So it just it depends, but you definitely want to see if you can see what resources are available. Some states have specific waivers for autism. Sometimes they have specific waivers for brain injury. I mean, and each state is a little bit different. So I know that we've got Colorado because we definitely have clients in Colorado. So you can reach out to us directly. Nicole, so, okay, I see. So we're going to put a copy, everybody's going to get an email with the slides and a link to the letter, and a PDF, form fillable PDF of the letter of intent. So you will check for that in your email. If you don't get it later today, check your spam, make sure it didn't go to spam. You guys can click this link here. This will have our upcoming webinars. Guys, we do a lot of webinars every week, all year long. And again, it's because our heart is to empower you. We don't want you to feel defeated and like, I can't do this. We want you to feel empowered, and we want you to take the tools and resources that we provide to you and help integrate that into the plan that you're making for your loved one and for yourself. I personally know how hard this is. And it's always something, right? Like it's like a trip to the mailbox and it's a letter from Health and Human Services, or it's a letter from the Social Security Administration, or it's something. And it does never end. You're absolutely right. But we're here to help and can absolutely help you on your journey. This is our team here. We work on a collaborative team here at CPG. We are, again, nationally certified as Social Security advisors, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and we're ready to help you. We work collaboratively in a team approach. So we're always happy to help and to talk to you a little bit further about your unique situation, about the planning that you've done so far. Some people have done a lot of planning. They've got the special needs trust, they've got the guardianship, they've got their wills, they got everything in place. And sometimes they just want a second opinion to make sure it's all right. Some people have started, but they need to pick up where they left off. And some people say, I would be embarrassed about what I haven't done. And I would like to just say it's not about looking back, it's about looking forward. So don't beat yourself up about what you haven't done, or if you got started and you put the brakes on it, or if you just need a second opinion. We're definitely here to help. And the steps that you take today are going to help you in the future. And it is a process that we're building upon. It's not overnight, I press the button and everything's done. It's a process, and so we want to help you and help you align your steps as you're planning. So this QR code that we have on the screen here will take you to our calendar. We offer free personalized consultations. So this will take you to our calendar where you can book your free personalized consultation with us. And during that consultation, it's designed for us to learn a little bit more about you and your family, what brings you to the meeting. Answer any questions that you may have. You may have got a letter. You may have some other questions that came up as a result of a webinar that you saw. We're going to share a little bit more about who we are, how we work, and the doors that you can walk through with us should you want to work with us in the future. There are fewer than 150 advisors in the U.S. that are nuanced and special needs. What that means is we're very, very busy. So we're not pushy. You don't have to worry about that. I know some people have had bad experience in the past, but we're very, very busy because we're so highly specialized in what we're working with. But we stand ready to help you. So just know that we're here, and whether you already have an advisor or you don't have an advisor, it makes no difference. Most people have an advisor that they've worked with, maybe one for years. They just don't have any background in special needs. I see in the chat box that someone said, in regard to an ABLE account, I've heard that it doesn't have to be in Texas or in the state that you live. Some states have better protocols. Your opinions. So yes, it's true that you do not have to have your state specific ABLE account. We do have opinions on the ABLE accounts and which ones are better, and what we recommend is it's outside of Texas is the one that we tend to recommend. But you can definitely have an Able account in any state. And so do check out our Able account webinar. I think we did one last week or the week before, so I know that that's fresh out there and on our YouTube channel. Does a special needs trust require updating yearly? No, but we do recommend that a special needs trust gets looked at every 3 to 5 years by an attorney. It doesn't mean that you have to update it. It means that you should have legal eyes on it, to see if there's been any law changes or any other updates that maybe you should be, making changes. And things change. And, I redid my special needs trust last year, and we were laughing at some of the provisions that were in the old one, because they were appropriate at the time, but things had changed and kids had grown up and, things like that. And so it is important to revisit this. So if you have a special needs trust that you did 5, 10, 15 years ago, it is time to get it reviewed. And we do have a specific attorney list that that we'll recommend. We don't recommend, we want you to work with a specialist on the financial side, that's our side. And on your legal document sides, you want to work with a specialist that's specifically nuanced and special needs. When you don't, you end up with documents that are wrong or rejected by the Social Security Administration, which you don't want. So I always just like to remind people that there's a lot of things that we can be do-it-yourselfers on. When it comes to special needs planning and your legal documents and having money in the right buckets and knowing when and how to apply for things, that's not a DIY project. You need professional guidance on these things, because what's at stake is too important to accidentally mess up. And honestly, we work with some really brilliant people. And it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has to do with how antiquated and ridiculous some of the hoops that we have to jump through are. And so that's where you need some help. It's like all of the following are true except, and that one except can tear the house down, right? And so that's what, we want to help with. So it's certainly been my pleasure being here with you today. I know that we're wrapping up a little bit early, so you guys will have a little bit more time on your lunch hour. We look forward to working with you and chatting with you individually on a personalized consultation. And if you have any additional questions, please let us know. Nicole, we will look forward to working with Conroe ISD again, and thank you so much for working with us today. Thanks, everyone,
Thank you so much.
and we hope you have a great afternoon. Bye now.
Bye bye.